Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Wake Day 2. Man, we hope that you guys enjoyed your time last night with Jeremiah hearing the Word. We hope that you are settled into your host homes, and this is crazy, but we even hope that you guys got some sleep last night, and hope that you're well rested so that you can participate in everything today. This morning, we're going to be talking about this idea of presence. Now, not presence as in gifts, but presence as in the presence of someone, right? I don't know about you guys, but I've noticed in my life that some people act differently in the presence of different people. You know, an example of this was one time I was watching this YouTube video where there was a camera following around this taxi driver, and this taxi driver would go and pick people up, and people would get in the back seat, and he'd say, "Where can I take you?" Tell them, and then they would get on their phones or do whatever else they could figure out what to do so that they didn't have to talk to him, right? And if that was the entirety of the video, then it would have been a pretty boring video. But what we actually end up seeing was that about halfway through the ride with each of these people, the taxi driver would take off a wig and take off a mask and reveal who he really was. And it wasn't just a normal person, it wasn't just a normal taxi driver, but it was actually Shaquille O'Neal, the famous basketball player. And what we saw is that people who were once sitting in the back seat on their phones, scrolling through or taking phone calls or doing pretty much anything that they could think of to do, stopped everything that they were doing to now talk to Shaquille O'Neal. It freaked them out that they had spent all this time sitting in the back seat not knowing who they were in the presence of. Their demeanors changed, their accents changed. They once were sitting back there scrolling through their phones to now taking them out trying to take pictures with this person. Why? Because they were in the presence of someone that they found important. You see, I think that when we truly understand who God is, then we react the same when we're in His presence. Now, as believers, we know that we have the Holy Spirit, and so we're always in the presence of God, which means that when we walk through our daily lives, we're in His presence. And I think that when we truly understand that, then our lives look different. You see, David was someone that God just literally describes as a man after His own heart. And we see in Psalm 16 that David says this in verses 8 through 11. He says, "I have set the Lord always before me. Because He is at my right hand, I shall not be shaken. Therefore my heart is glad and my whole being rejoices. My flesh also dwells secure. For you will not abandon my soul to Sheol, or let your Holy One see corruption. You make known to me the path of life. In your presence there is fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore." See, David is writing this song, writing this prayer to the Lord, because he realizes the difference of trying to be in his own presence and being in the presence of the Lord. You see, we can see that David actually is writing this in a time of struggle. He's writing this song, writing this prayer in a time of struggle, and he's saying, "God, I don't want to rely on myself, but instead I want to sit in your presence to walk through this struggle." You see, and David acknowledges the fact that in the presence of the Lord, he will not be shaken. In the presence of the Lord, he is secure. In the presence of the Lord, he has the fullness of joy. David knows that in the presence of the Lord, man, his demeanor changes, his actions change. He is no longer needing to rely on himself, but instead can rest in the presence of the Lord. My prayer is that this morning we could do the same. This morning, my prayer is that we can rest in the presence of the Lord. That if we're at a point in life that is considered a good time for us, that we can rest in the presence of the Lord and celebrate that all God is doing in and around us. If we're at a point in our lives where we really don't feel like anything's going on, we don't really feel like we're hearing from God, but we're not hearing from God, but we're not really sure, well then I pray that you could rest in the presence of the Lord and seek opportunities to see. If we're in a time in our lives that is really difficult, that is a struggle, like David, well then I pray that we can rest in the presence of the Lord this morning, knowing that God is in control, knowing that we don't have to handle this situation on our own. My prayer is that we can realize the significance of who God is, that our demeanor would change, our actions would change, because we realize that we are in His presence. I pray for you this morning that you would do just as Psalm 46:10 says, that you would be still and that you would know that He is God, that you would rest in His presence this morning. As you guys can see, there's some booklets that we gave you last night, and I put some questions in there for you guys to discuss in your small groups. But until then, sit, be still, and rest in the presence of the Lord.